Good evening, everyone. I'm David Eglin, President of the Society for Contemporary Art at the Art Institute of Chicago. We are really excited to welcome all of you to our first program of 2021 with Fahim Majid, who will be in conversation with Tempest Hazel. Before we turn the camera over to Programming Chair Patty Sternberg, I want to take a few moments and highlight our recent collector sale, as well as some of our upcoming SCA programming. As many of you know, we held our very first SCA virtual fundraiser in December. The SCA collector sale kicked off on December 2nd with a virtual program emceed by Tony Tassett and Jason Pickelman, and an online art auction hosted on Sotheby's.com, which ran through December 14th. Well, I just wanted to let everyone know that the fundraiser was a huge success. We raised more money than in the history of any other SCA fundraiser, and these dollars will be instrumental in continuing our programming, like tonight's lecture, our annual acquisition process, and supporting the Art Institute with specific projects and exhibitions through the SCA Activation Fund. A big thank you to all of you who supported the SCA through your bidding or sponsorship of the collector sale. Also, thanks to our co-chairs, Michelle Holland and Andy Friedman, our chair, Kate Neiser, as well as the entire benefit committee. And a big shout out to our lead sponsors of the collector's sale, Prada and Sotheby's. Turning back to our lecture series, I want to highlight a few of our upcoming programs. On February 24th, we are pleased to welcome artist Beverly Fishman. And on March 23rd, we've happily rescheduled artist Charles Atlas, who we had to postpone last spring due to COVID. More details will follow on these terrific programs. Please sign up for these events on the SCA website. Now let me turn the camera over to Programming Chair Patty Sternberg, who will be introducing tonight's speakers. Patty?
Thank you, David. Tonight we will hear from Chicago-based artist Fahim Majid, along with curator and writer Tempest Hazel. Fahim blends his unique experience as an artist, nonprofit administrator, and curator to create works that focus on institutional critique and exhibitions that level collaboration to engage his immediate and the broader community in meaningful dialogue. Majid received his BFA from Howard University and his MFA from the University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC. He has also had solo exhibitions at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago, School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Tufts University, Boston, and the Hyde Park Art Center. From 2005 to 2011, Majid served as the executive director and curator for the South Side Community Art Center, and is currently co-director and founder of the Floating Museum. Majid is a recipient of a Field Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation Collaborative Leaders for a New Chicago Award in 2020, Joyce Foundation Award 2020, and the Joan Mitchell Painters and Sculptures Grant 2015, and the Harpo Foundation Award 2016. Tempest is a writer, curator, and co-founder of recent Warhol Foundation grant recipient 60 Inches from Center, a Chicago-based art publication and archiving initiative that has promoted and preserved the practices of BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ artists and artists with disabilities across the Midwest since 2010. Her curatorial work and work with 60 was recently recognized with a J. Franklin Jameson Archival Advocacy Award from the Society of American Archivists. She is also the Arts Program Officer for the Field Foundation. Her work at Field explores the ways in which Chicago's artists, cultural workers, and their communities can challenge the systems that stifle their ability to thrive and to develop alternative models that encourage self-determination, benefit communities, and align with community-identified needs, culture, and values. Please join me in warmly welcoming Fahim Majid and Tempest Hazel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Patty, for that great introduction. Hi, I'm Fahim Majid. I first want to just thank the Society for Contemporary Art for hosting me and Tempest here today. I'm going to do about 15 minutes talking about some of my work, and then Tempest will come in and we'll continue the conversation. So let's go ahead and start that. So I'm going to start this image here with this image. This is an image, if anyone's seen me present in the past or knows my work, it's an image that I often start with. It's the image I use when I think of myself, a self-portrait. It's the image when I think of a community. This is actually an image from the Southside Community Arts Center taken in the early 2000s. And basically shows one of the numerous communities that takes advantage of this space and that's been supported by this space. So you see the building in the back, a number of artists that kind of were identifying kind of the Bronzeville area or Bronzeville artists. In the front is one of my heroes, Dr. Margaret Burroughs, and we're going to talk about her a little later. For those that don't know about the Southside Community Arts Center, first, shame on you. Shame on you. You should know about it. No, I'm joking, but that's totally understandable. But to give you a little background, it was founded out of the WPA in the late 30s, kind of towards the end of the Depression. And just too much to talk about in this talk, but I encourage you to find out more. Currently, I have an exhibition there. It's still running. It's 80 years old. And I was executive director there for some time. It was kind of the space that was home to me and introduced me to Chicago when I first came here a little under 20 years ago. And this is just a fun image. I have a whole other presentation, but this image of a young Charles White and a young Gordon Parks teaching a painting class back in the early 40s. So there's a number of young talent and artists that have come through this space and called it home. And much of my work that I talk about tonight and in general usually harkens back to the history, the architecture, the impact of the Southside Community Arts Center. For me, that time was kind of like it's a way of me thinking of like a microcosm, almost like a laboratory, to think about much larger issues and larger challenges through aesthetics. So I thought this is going to be a little bit of a unique image in that I'm not going to talk too much about this work. I have multiple kind of bodies of work, but I was going to try to share some of my more recent work, the work that's going to be coming up at the Hyde Park Arts Center. I have a solo show coming in April. But a lot of my kind of work over the past 20 years, I'm kind of doing a mini retrospective at the Southside Community Arts Center right now. But this piece was kind of on the front cover for the advertisement, so I thought it would be in bad taste not to kind of talk about it a little bit. So this is a work by Barbara Jones Hogu, a founding member of the Afro-Cobra movement back in the 60s. So as an example, Barbara has a huge impact on my work, but in thinking about the image that you might have saw on the advertisement, this is some of my kind of Kool-Aid stained OSB self kind of manufactured and pressed particle board that I call it. And this was an installation that I did that was at the Chicago Cultural Center a couple of years back. And so I thought I'd kind of make a reference to that to think about once again how that piece that I showed you, Barbara Jones Hogu, is in the collections of the Southside Community Arts Center, and she was someone that came in and out of there. So once again, having impact. But I want to talk about Margaret Burroughs kind of quickly, who was a young person when the Southside Community Arts Center was founded, and was integral to the founding of that space, but also founded the DuSable Museum, first museum of African American history in the country, in her home, which was across the street. As well in around the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. But I spent a lot of time with her in her later years. This is us at Ace Hardware. I would often drive her around, as many people did. She would just hop in the car and tell you where to go. And this is some of her work. She's kind of known for printmaking, but she was really into making kind of copies and multiples. So me kind of thinking about institution building, I often play around thinking about like literally kind of tongue in cheek, the materials for institution building. This is the drywall etching that I did. That was a part of my modernity series, thinking about her work and doing deep dives into her printmaking. And then more recently, well, semi-recently, I guess, I messed up my hand in 2015 and couldn't make work. So Dr. Burroughs wasn't, through her actions, she made copies and multiples. She was all about distribution, and she really was impacted by Mexican printmakers and getting artwork in people's hands. So, the signature was an interesting thing. It wasn't really, didn't seem that important to her. So she would sign the print if that made it more valuable. But she was often, if you met her, she would put a print in your hand. I often started to notice she would sign the artwork of her students that were in prison because she taught in the prison system. So during this time, just to kind of be close to her, she had passed by this point, I started trying to learn how to, I guess, plagiarize or learn how to do her signature, similar to how she would sign other things. So it was a lot of repetition. And in earlier works, you can kind of see where I kind of put the time down here. This one looks like it was about 14 minutes, somewhere 2 hours or 3 hours. And it was an exercise in reflection, of me trying to forge her signature and connect to her legacy. So, and some of the things I'm showing you are things that, for those that know my work, you may have not seen. So I thought I'd share some new things that I've been working on or kind of deep in the crates, per se. For those, once again, this is Southside Community Arts Center, a wonderful history. This is the redesigned Chicago New Bauhaus Gallery. So I spent a lot of time in this space, and I spent a lot of time referencing these walls, which were the intention of the walls were really unlike most galleries where you cover up the history in the past. Every time a show comes, you kind of brush away all the marks. But this is kind of building on that, the building on time. So what you're looking at are 80 years of mark making. Every exhibition from Charles White to Gordon Parks to Elizabeth Catlett to you name it, their marks are still there. And every artist that comes through and shows, usually emerging, young, or even senior, actually, they get to take part in that legacy. So it was an interesting kind of play on in comparison to IIT's Crown Hall, which is very precious, but kind of in a different way. So I spent a lot of time there, and a lot of my recent work and the work I'm kind of focusing on for the Hyde Park Art Center are these rubbings of spaces that help me think about time. It helped me think about the future, almost function as photographs. So it's a way of kind of capturing something in the moment, but like the objects aren't pinned down, so they vibrate. So doing a rubbing of something that you don't traditionally do a rubbing of is actually a very challenging thing, and you kind of have to give in to the moment. So when I go to the center and I do these rubbings, it's a kind of a very spiritual thing for me. And I love the staff and the director there and the board who kind of support my interest in deep diving into the space beyond my being the executive director. So this is just an image of a larger piece that I did of the space at the time. And, some might ask why rubbings. I was actually inspired to do rubbings by Margaret Burroughs, once again, who I heard that with her spare money and spare time, she would often do pay for unmarked graves of prisoners who had passed away. And I heard about this, and then I heard about this tombstone of Jack Johnson that she had purchased and was going to donate when she heard that he didn't have a marker, but then found out that the family actually was in the process of doing something much bigger. And so this tombstone was in the DeSalvo Museum's collection. I spent a little time with it. So I was just thinking about what would a rubbing of that look like? So thinking about a Black institution, the end of an institution. So in a lot of ways, these are reminiscent of kind of like shrouds, and think about demise or end. These are some of the smaller works of the floors, and they kind of turn into drawings. So they're very like just nice to look at. I enjoy them a lot. So as I start to extend, I was invited by Romy Crawford to contribute 5 images for a publication she was working on about the Wall of Respect. So this is a series called Tracing Respect. And I started actually fashioning my own charcoal out of objects. So that's a mask that I made into charcoal and used to do rubbings. This is the finished component. This was for a show that I did with Jan Tichy. I think it was in Berlin. So I really like these because they don't necessarily speak to the space, but they're kind of these non-specific drawings, but they're actually very specific to a space and a time as well. So kind of with these last couple of minutes, I thought I'd talk just briefly about what my show that's coming up in Hyde Park Art Center. I like taking on challenging projects. It's there's a lot to discuss. There's multiple sides. I have an organization called Floating Museum, a collaborative kind of art collaborative that I work with three others as well. But I thought I kind of share a little bit of some of the work that's I'm doing in the studio specifically. Coming back and nerding out about the Southside Community Arts Center's history, my latest challenge is if after you do a rubbing of the walls of the gallery, I thought I'd do a rubbing of the architecture, the exterior. So what's fascinating about the Southside Community Arts Center is the interior is 1930s Chicago New Bauhaus, kind of gutted out, and the exterior is late 1800s Georgian Revival kind of building. So there's this clash of architecture, this conflict that happens from the exterior to the interior, and both of them have a history. It was rumored to be the mansion of the founders. What is it? Where the White Sox Stadium was. What was it? The Comiskey. Yeah, Comiskey Park, Comiskey Mansion. Yeah, it was called the Comiskey Mansion. It was rumored, it wasn't proven, but everyone knew it as a Comiskey Mansion before the Southside Community Arts Center moved in the late 40s. So lots of little really great stories. But I wanted to capture some of that. So this past summer, had to put my mask on, had to get out of my funk and depression, had to get out of my basement. I pulled my team together, and we got out there, and we started doing the rubbing of the exterior of the building. And so what's going to happen, so I'll be unveiling this piece in April at the Hyde Park Art Center, and the Joyce Foundation and the Hyde Park Art Center have been so great in supporting the making of this project, especially during really challenging times. So we're in the midst of COVID, and we were able to do something really spectacular, and it's still coming together. We're still working on it, but had an amazing team. So thank you to the Southside Community Arts Center, Hyde Park Art Center, and the Joyce Foundation for supporting that work. But yeah, I think I'll end it there, actually. And I'm excited to talk with Tempest and just take note of some of the things I've shown you. You can ask questions a little later on. So thank you.
Hey, Fahim.
Hey, Tempest, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I have to start off by saying that I'm excited to be in conversation with you, and I'm really thankful to the Society for Contemporary Art for inviting me to basically have a conversation with family in public.
Yes.
And, you know, I really think of you as a friend and someone whose work I've followed. And I also, this, consider you a mentor in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Just your work with the center has been so instrumental and important to me in my own Chicago art upbringing. So I'm just really excited to have a conversation with you, and just want the folks out there listening to know that if you feel at any point like you're eavesdropping on a conversation between friends, that's basically what's going to happen here. So we'll try to keep the inside jokes to a minimum. But I kind of want to just dive right in, because I know we don't have much time, and we can really run away with all of the conversation. So I want to start off talking about material. First, there was a question that came in about the rubbings.
Yeah,
and
I just saw
those
that.
those are on fabric, right?
Yeah, they're on muslin. And oftentimes you'll see even in the kind of OSB particle board pieces that I make, I try to find readily available things, inexpensive things, and kind of push them to show value. So muslin is a very inexpensive material, readily available. You see it everywhere, but often kind of overlooked. So those choices become metaphors for thinking about the people in the communities that I live and work in as well. So that's why I choose those. Yeah.
So I want to talk more about that. So, when I first was introduced to your work, it was I'm bad with dates. It might've been like 2008 or 2009. And at that time you were making those steel sculptures that are some of my favorites, and they had, I really loved them because they had these characters and these figures that were in these precarious
Mhm.
situations and kind of
Mhm.
hanging from ceilings, and like, so those are some of my favorites. But over the years, that's kind of changed. Your work has evolved, and
Mhm.
you started using like
Mhm.
drywall and the particle board pieces that you showed, or like reams of muslin, or
Mhm.
even like carrying around the panels of the center
Right.
for different installation objects. And your material choices, to me, they point to ideas and efforts around like building, like literally, but then also institutionally, of like the institution building that you talk about with Dr. Burrows. But I'm wondering if you could just talk more about the material evolution of your work.
Yeah. At heart, I was trained as a metal sculptor. I went to Howard University, and I was the only sculpture major in the whole university. So,
Wow.
and the side story, I got to meet Elizabeth Catlett was the first graduate of that sculpture department as well. So I got to meet her one-on-one, bumping into her walking through a studio late at night. But anyway, well, that's a side story. But no, what that means is I learned early on. You can imagine what the budget is when you have one major, right? So early on, I learned how to find materials from demolished buildings, how to make something out of nothing. That was part of my education, and it took me really far and launched my my career at a very young age. I was able to do these kind of really big sculptures. But I want to say when I came to Southside Community Arts Center, and eventually as an artist in need, and eventually became the curator, and then that evolved into acting executive director, and then eventually executive director. I wanted my art to kind of mirror some of my passion for the center in a certain sort of way. So when I went to grad school, with the assistance of people like, Dan Peterman was very instrumental in kind of walking me through the doors of a space where I don't think my work at the time was quite in dialogue with the type of work that was being made in the space. But, Dan saw something and gave me some exposure. And I just marveled. I knew when my education was the Sylvester Brittons, the Jeff Donaldsons, the Charles Whites. And then walking in that space, that was not the language that was used. Those weren't the artists that were kind of dropped. So I was able to take that with me into that space, and then also learn about John Cage, like, Jasper Johns, like these artists that that weren't discussed in the kind of space that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of fun kind of moving in between those and seeing some of the similarities and recontextualizing and kind of code switching in between these spaces, and that started to impact the work as well. So, I just, the figurative metal work that I loved, that I knew, at some point, it just wasn't doing what I needed it to do. I needed to put more pressure on it. I need to impact the places and the spaces I cared about. So I'm still a metal sculptor. I just don't do a lot of metal work these days, but it comes back. I still love the figure. But I put more pressure on my work. My work needs to carry more weight.
Yeah. So as I was looking back on all of your work, and just kind of refreshing myself for this conversation, I was reminded, as I usually am, of just like the labor of artists and the work of artists. And especially now, because we've had just such a devastating year and artists have been struggling alongside everybody else. But I think we all understand and know that art has immeasurable labor that's embedded within it, some that's visible, some that's invisible. And it's become, to me, there are ways in which that labor has become more visible within your work over the years. And that's through photos and how you talk about it, or even the materials that you use. And I'm curious if that's intentional, if that's become like an intentional piece of the process. And even with how you talk about the work, you show a lot of images that show you in process and like these very kind of like big, laborious, kind of repetitive practices. So I'm just curious how that has shown up, how it's become more and more visible in your work, if that's intentional or has happened organically.
Yeah, yeah, it has, and I say it also. Sometimes I have to get a little help, because it has been, since the beginning, it's very strenuous on the body actually.
Hmm.
But I started thinking about labor. I have this video piece called Piano Push that I'm actually, where I push a piano from one side of the center's gallery very slowly to the other side. And I'm actually revisiting that as a video work for my show at Hyde Park Arts Center coming up. But I started. That was an interesting moment where the labor of literally having to move a piano from one side to the other became performative, right? So I show some of that because I do think the presence of the labor of the artist is important, but it's also, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's like laying out a mandala. Like it's spiritual. Like to really connect with the material and do something repetitive over and over and over. And then something starts to happen. The more time you spend with it, the harder it is. You feel it in your back, you feel it in your hands, your knees. So when I do those rubbings, it's not easy. I mean, it's very hard. I'll take a break and for a while and I'll come back. So yeah, I'm gonna do a rubbing on the floors, and I get down there, and then all of a sudden those pains just shoot up your back, and you just say, oh, right, okay, so I'm gonna feel this for a while. So let me slow down and do it. And the rubbings, they're like moving around. They're not pinned down, so it's frustrating. It's not a one-to-one. You go one direction, and then by the time you come back, the fabric has moved on you. So you just gotta get it. And I think about it as a metaphor for running a space like the Southside Community Arts Center. It's constantly moving. It's constantly evolving. And you can get frustrated about it, or you can give in and just go with the flow. And just it's not what you intended, but it is what it is, and it's beautiful. So yeah, all those, that labor is the metaphor for running a space, running a cultural space. Not just a cultural space, but a lot of art administrators and educators deal with this in our larger institutions. It's heavy lifting that's not seen. So yeah, it's kind of a shout out to some of that labor.
Yeah. Oof. Have you ever started a piece and it veered so far that you couldn't bring it back? Have you ever started one of the rubbings or something where you had to begin again?
The drywall, the etchings. I showed the drywall etchings. I also had some OSB etchings as well. I have a whole series, but I was doing these really large kind of etchings of really zoomed in images of Margaret Burroughs prints. And there's one that's out of drywall. It defeated me. I had to put it to the side because things started getting inverted and I just couldn't figure out. So, I mean, there's a couple of those things. I wouldn't say it defeats me, but sometimes I just need I had to put something in the corner. So you're acting up. You need to go sit in the corner. You need to go sit in the corner. But I really do like the challenge. And sometimes some ways that's why my work is so varied, because I like a challenge. So if I get bored, if it's not challenging me, both physically and mentally, sometimes, I'll put it down or add a layer to it. So that's why my work sometimes looks pretty varied.
Yeah.
It's not weird that I'm doing a rubbing of a building. And now I'm we're talking about doing another rubbing of some William Walker properties as well. It's yeah, let's go bigger. It's yeah, of course.
So then, I've had a long relationship with your work, and I think it's just, from the sculptures that I first talked about, and before I met you, I met your sculpture, I met your work, and it's always kind of had an incredible impact. And when I think about the works that have had the most transformative impact on me, and why I think about when I think about why I've built my practice around archives and things like that, it's mostly because of, the energy and what it carries, and the histories and the legacies and the knowledges and the generations of the people who came before us.
Yeah.
And to me, your work is in a lot of ways an embodiment of legacy. And when you bring your work into space, and I know there's an image that I wanted to show, if you could pull that
There we
up.
go. Yeah.
when you bring your work into a space, you're not just bringing you're bringing your own history, you're bringing your family history, you're bringing a legacy of Black artists, a Black lexicon, you're bringing a giant Black cultural canon of and beyond Chicago. And that to me is always front of mind when I've experienced your work in other places. Particularly like the iterations of planning and maintaining a perennial garden and the wall of respect rubbings that you talked about in the shroud work. And when I see these and the works kind of within this sort of repertoire show up at the MCA or at Iceberg Projects or Hyde Park Cultural Center, Andrew Rayford's gallery, I can't help but think about what these works kind of carry with them and how you're quite literally installing the Southside Community Arts Center, which includes hundreds upon hundreds of artists and 80 years of history along with it. So for you, what does installing this work and, you know, by way of the work, this history within these spaces, what does that mean to you? Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I, you know, it's, you know, we started out with an image of like over 100 artists sitting in front of the Southside Community Arts Center. When I think of myself, that's what I think of. Right. I remember sitting at the Southside Community Arts Center when I first came. I was fresh to Chicago, didn't know anything, and sitting with artists like Greg Spears and Robert Johnson, and just talking about, like, daydreaming about what was possible. Like we're doing all this amazing stuff here. No one, you know, not necessarily no one knows about it, but we have a very insular group of people that know about it. We're a community, but we're interested about, you know, being more international or spreading the word about what was so great about the artists that were coming out of the Southside Community Arts Center over the generations. So I take great pride in that. I took that as my own mission. Like, so I carry the mission of the Southside Community Arts Center as an administrator. So yes, I'm an administrator as well as an artist and a curator. I wear a lot of different hats. But you know, oftentimes, you know, many artists, especially artists, kind of have to wear lots of different hats. So I just leaned into it, you know. So doing the show at the Southside, doing the show at the MCA was huge. It was a big moment for any artist to have their first major solo exhibition, right? But what I took great pride in is putting those etchings that were revisiting Margaret Burroughs' work, because Margaret Burroughs' printmaking would never be in a contemporary art museum. That is not the space that her work is normally shown. So now I was excited to have Margaret Burroughs with me at my first show and in the show, front and center. And that makes my work that much stronger. So by revisiting it, it's just the ideas are still there. They haven't changed or evolved. They're genius. Their ideas are genius, but it's just kind of packaged a little differently through my work or through another lens of access that allows for more people to come in and see that greatness as well. Because we already know she's great, right? We already know Sylvester Britton's great. We already know, you know, Susan Woodson was an amazing impact, you know, but we need to make sure other people know how great they were too.
Yeah. I mean, I was over here quietly chuckling when at the opening you said, if you don't know the Southside Community Arts Center, shame on you. And I have to I have to second that. I have to second that.
A lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know it, and it's okay. It's not a shame on you, but you know, I talk about breadcrumbs, and it's not hit you over the head. But in order to understand my work, you're gonna have to understand these other things. I mean, I love to look at my work, and that's fine. And a lot of people, it takes some time to get there. It took me some time to get there. But it's such an amazing space. But coming to the center is just a microcosm. Like there's so many other spaces. It's just an example to think about. And I have gone and worked in other spaces. I've gone to Tufts and done some site-specific work, like going through Boston with Abigail Satinsky, really kind of learning about that space. So it just kind of gave me a toolkit on how to kind of pull out these things. You know, spend some time in South Africa doing some of that same type of work. So it's exciting. It's just, you know, it's my laboratory.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. So then I think one of the things that we have in common is that the more we learn and dig into Dr. Burroughs's legacy, it just is a well that is forever kind of like giving to us.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've thought about her work in my curatorial practice and writing, and,
Mhm.
you know, you've done that in so many different ways. And I know for me, whenever I'm combing through her materials, or reading her letters or her open letters that she published in the Chicago Defender, or watching
Mhm.
videos of her roller skating, which is a quiet shout out to Tara Betts and Skylar Hearn. Or, you know, I'm learning from her, especially some of
Yeah.
the like stealth moves that she made, and how
Yeah.
relentless and persuasive she was. And
Yep.
also the simultaneous like sharpness and softness of her care.
Yes.
And but then I also think about her as a trickster. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about this, which I
Mhm.
think you teaching yourself her signature kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
speaks to that, and how sometimes it takes the touch of a trickster to get things done and to make things move. You know,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
kind of had to be a trickster in order for the Southside Community Arts Center to happen, or for DuSable to happen. And
Yeah.
similar to, you know, the folks, like, of course, she didn't do it alone, similar to the folks that she was kind of co-conspiring with. But can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about some of the lessons that you've learned specifically from Dr. Burroughs over time? And
Yeah.
maybe some of the lessons that you've learned about the center?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, totally. It's funny you say trickster. So, one misconception about my work, and I hear people say it, and it always makes me kind of cringe, because they say that I challenge, I forget what they say, like challenge institutional critique of kind of white space. And actually, that's not what I do. I actually challenge Black space, right? So, as much as I love a space like Southside Community Arts Center, I'm also its biggest critic. Right. And I believe in attacking the vulnerable parts of our weakest institutions as a way of strengthening them. So when you talk about trickster and learning things from Dr. Burroughs, a lot of people don't know this. Dr. Burroughs is very important and supportive, and gave me the courage to do one of my most controversial shows while I was at the Southside Community Arts Center, was basically the demise of the Southside Community Arts Center. And to this day, kind of strikes people. But basically, for those that don't know, I was sending out images of the building on fire and saying that the center was closing its doors. And I brought together a group of about 10 people. Dale Washington and Theaster Gates was a part of this. Kind of, you talk about a trickster, Travis, a number of people, Yeshua Klaus, took part in, like, how can we, like, attack the thing we love, right? So things like forging Dr. Burroughs' signature, even using the word forgery, like, as theft. There's definitely a way of kind of doing things that maybe kind of raise an eyebrow. But the assumption that something can't defend itself is problematic. The assumption that there has to be a savior complex is problematic, because learning from people like Afra Kober and Margaret Burroughs. Margaret Burroughs didn't think anyone needed to save her. She did it herself. She was mad. She was frustrated. You know, the school systems were not teaching the right history. They were not teaching equity. They weren't teaching world art. They were only teaching one type of art. So instead, she complained about it and then did something about it, and that's it. Yeah. She just did it, and that's what I wait around for permission from anybody. That's what I got from her. I'm not asking anyone for permission. I'm gonna figure out how to get it done, and that's what I learned from her. Not like, if you say no, then I'm gonna still do it. I'm just gonna figure out another way. You know, so that's what I learned from her.
Yeah, that's a good lesson.
Yeah.
So my last question before I turn it over to audience questions. So all of you listening, please feel free to hop in the Q&A and add your questions. I want to bring this conversation full circle. So in May of 2012, we first sat down to talk about your piece, Planning and Maintaining a Perennial Garden, when it was installed at the Hyde Park Art Center, for an interview that I did for 60. That was later published in this book, Support Networks.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, look at that.
And, you know, funny enough, your picture
there it is.
It's right there in there.
There it is.
So I want to kind of bring this full circle. And in that interview, I ask a question about you use the term, or you say, almost collectible. And I just want to revisit that question and ask you now, 9 years later, and after recently having a conversation with you about collecting with Diaspora Rhythms co-founder
That's
Patrick
right.
McCoy, and hi to any Diaspora
Yeah.
Rhythms
Yes.
collectors in the building. I just want to revisit that question and ask you, what makes something collectible, or what do you mean by almost
Wow.
collectible?
Jeez. So the almost collectible collection was there was an image that we didn't really refer to it, but basically I took the things from the center. The center has an amazing collection of 300 works, and also shout out, they just launched their new website. So now is a great time. You can actually see the collection on the website. Monique Brinkman Hill is new director, a beautiful website. So you should definitely check that out. But talking about this collection, so there's the collection that's valuable, the Charles Whites, the Archibald Motley's, that's kind of in that space dubbed as valuable. And then you have the things that are hanging on the wall because they're emerging artists coming in, or, you know, living artists showing work as well. But then in between, there are these things that either are left over, right? The things that are somewhere in limbo, as I called it, that really institutionally become a problem because they're too valuable to throw out, but not quite where, like, valuable in the sense to be put into the vault, right? So they just kind of hang out, right? So I thought about this notion of limbo art, abandoned art, that someone really took the time to make, and it was really valuable at one point, but then was left over. So that's what I kind of created, that landscape on that first installation was a landscape of the almost collectible collection. And then by drawing attention to it, the question is, does it become collectible? Like, does it push it into this other type of valued space? I don't know. I probably should have kept that almost collectible collection together, because now it's been kind of dispersed back into the almost collectibleness. I don't know where a lot of stuff is. Maybe I'll kind of pull some of that stuff back together. But, you know, I don't know. I think at some of it's time. I like to think that objects are containers for history. All those things, for me, things that we talk about, archives, they're containers for ideas in a lot of ways, no matter how much labor is put into it. If there's no idea, no heart, passion, history, or thought that it contains, then it's just a flat object. I mean, and sometimes a flat object's okay, but I generally imbue a lot of my work with all those things at the same time.
Yeah, thanks for that. I can't believe that was that long. You know, 2012 seems so long ago.
I know. We got to do the after party, Tempest. We got to do the 3-hour conversation. Last night, y'all, we had a 3-hour conversation. It was supposed to be a 10-minute call. We ended up talking for 3 hours, and that was short. So, look.
Yeah. So audience questions. I'm going to kind of go through these, and let's see where to start. Oh. Hey, Eric. Eric Peterson is in the audience. So Eric says that he has great memories of the remnants of your labor, Fahim, covered in drywall dust from your etchings at UIC. So just wanted to put that comment out there for you.
I think I told you, we talked about that a little last night. Eric is my classmate from UIC and remembers when I first started doing this work in my suit. I started wearing a suit all the time to do this work. And let's just say, dust started showing up all over the building, and I was doing these molds, and I was learning how to do molds. So everything was sticky and dusty, and our shop tech was eventually figured out it was me. It wasn't a nice conversation, but good times.
So the trail of dust going back to your studio.
Yeah, exactly. I had to throw them off the path and run into other people's studios.
And then we've got Lisa in the audience who's asking, is the labor or process of your work more important than the outcome?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, it's a balance. What having so I didn't talk about the Floating Museum, but for a long time, especially when I went to school, I started to merge the passion for arts administration and running the building, the repetitive nature of that, with the repetitive nature of a studio practice, right? So I kind of brought those things together, and with the floating, you know, so that they were seamless, right? But so what having the Floating Museum does, it allows me to put a lot of my community, my more like really deep diving community administrative work kind of in that space. And then it frees me up to really kind of spend time with myself in the studio and reflect, because I think I'm at a moment of reflection, especially as a lot of the people who I reference, you know, the Howard Hills, the Susan Woodsons, You know, all these, the Doug Williams, you know, they've all transitioned. And what I realized was that they used to talk at me a lot. And I used to have to sit there and be talked at. And now that they've gone on, I realized, oh, they were imbuing me with these things. So now I'm in a moment of reflection and figuring out how to get all this out into my work.
Yeah.
So that's, the process is real important, but the process is long. It's not just a labor of making a thing, which takes a long time, but it's also this past 20 years of being talked at and listening and learning as well.
Yeah.
So.
And Valerie has a question when it comes to your rubbings. Do you overlay layers?
For the exterior of the building, yes, I had to. It was just too heavy fabric, so I actually taught myself to sew because of COVID. Just working close with studio assistants wasn't going to happen. So if anyone's been following me on my Instagram feed, you'll see me in my basement. I ruined my house because it was near an intake, so all the graphite from the thing was getting sucked that I didn't know. So so I've been cleaning my house ever since. But yeah, I spent the last couple months stitching and sewing this building size piece of fabric in a tight space in my basement. So I'm excited. It's done, but I'm excited.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
You know,
really
because
awesome.
the space for all of you, for those who have or haven't been to the Hyde Park Art Center's main gallery space, it's just huge. And it just, the thought of trying to understand to scale the facade of the Southside Community Arts Center within that gallery space, my mind goes wild thinking about that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
And then Tiff, is also a side note, because a lot of people don't realize this, one of the reasons why, so some might ask, why show the Southside Community Arts Center kind of this Black institution, cultural institution in Hyde Park Arts Center, which is more of a dominant institution, so a community center. They're neighboring art centers like Hyde Park sits next to Bronzeville, where the Southside Community Arts Center. So they're within 10 minutes of each other. They were founded 80 years ago, roughly the same year as each other. But there isn't any, like, we're like through this exchange. The way I envisioned this before COVID was that the solo show at the center dovetailed into the new work at the Hyde Park Arts Center. So it's like the making, the show, it was this whole like balance. But I was really excited about working with Kate, the director at the Hyde Park Arts Center, and now Monique at the Southside Community Arts Center. And they've been working together through this. And it's just really exciting to see what potentially additionally comes out of this, because a lot of the artists at the Southside Community Arts Center are also showing at the Hyde Park Arts Center, and vice versa. And by them working together or coming together, it only makes better for the communities that they serve as well. So this has been really wonderful, especially something that I needed during this time. So I'm excited what's going to come out of this show. It's a lot of really great things coming.
Yeah, we've got a lot of really great questions coming in. I'm going to try to get to all of them. I just want to give a shout out. Dorian Sylvain is in the room and
hey, Dorian.
was asking about exhibiting your large scale rubbings. And I think you kind of answered that a little bit. And then let's see, there was another question. That's a really interesting one. This comes from, please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, but Rudyard. And the question is, how does it feel to be one of the most dynamic young artists of our time? And do you feel the weight of your position as a voice for this generation and your role in what will be history one day?
Wow, that makes me think about my conversations with Kerry. I have conversations with Kerry James Marshall a handful of times, and he talks a lot about that, right? What is like think about legacy a little bit, like impact, and I think about what artists get to be included in the art canon, right? So for every one artist, there's 1,000 artists that just aren't necessarily remembered in the broader art canon. I don't know. I used to really think about that a lot. And, I think Kerry would say about being strategic and being specific about your actions so that they can have broader impact. But I think at this moment, I'm really focused on just doing the things I want to do. And if someone else chooses to write about that, if someone else chooses to show that, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
You know, I would love that, but I'm not waiting around.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to wait around. It's going to work out how it's going to work out.
Mhm.
And you know, the community and the sport has been wonderful as well. Working with people like you, Tempest, working with young students coming up, that excites me as much as making my work. I get excited about when others like win. I love it. It's like win, win, win. I love it. I love it. It makes me really happy. It makes me really happy.
Yeah. So many good questions in here, y'all. There's
Thanks
one.
everybody for coming out. I see a lot of people, so thank y'all for the support and love.
Yeah, I mean, so to go off of that, let's see, which one to go to?
Lakeisha asked, are we going to do a project together?
I know.
We got to do a
Lakeisha-
project together.
Lakeisha's out here trying to plant seeds.
Lakeisha, let me tell you something. Let me tell you. So this is what you don't know, and what I'm going to reach out to Lakeisha too. We got to write the history.
I know.
You understand? We got to write the history. We can't wait around for other people to write our history. We got to write the history, not just make. We can't just be we got to be on the walls. We got to be in the pages. We got to be the publishers. We got to do all of it. And we need to stop waiting around. Like, stop waiting around for someone to write about these moments. We got to write about it. So that's what we going to do.
Yeah.
It ain't just going to be me and Tempest. All of us. We got, you know.
Are the three of us going to collaborate?
All of us. We gonna make it happen.
You sound like Dr. Adams, Carol Adams. Okay, so then this other question comes from, where is it? From Sophia. What tips do you have for young artists that are new to Chicago, and any suggestions on how to build a network and become part of a community?
That's a great question. And that's one that pretty much is almost at every artist talk ever. And that's a good question. And that, for me, there's a lot of different approaches, but my approach was to give, right? So I was very fortunate when I came to Chicago. I didn't know anyone, really. You know, I followed my wife down here, girlfriend at the time, my wife, that worked out. She, you know, I met an artist, and they told me, oh, you don't know nobody? You got to go to Southside Community Arts Center. So that was the space I went. But there are a lot of other spaces you go. And then when I went, they opened their arms, and then I started volunteering because I had the capacity. I gave what I could. And then when it was time to fill a position that wasn't there when I came, they looked around the room and say, hey, here's someone that's kind of, look what he can do with no money. Look what he has available. He brought those skills. I had these skills. I had to be able to hang a show. I had some physical labor I could do. I had some passion. And then they put me into a position, not a big, well-paid position, and that turned into one thing. But the whole time I was building my networks. I was meeting people, and that's how I was introduced to Chicago. And then everything that I put out, tenfold came back. So I always tell my students, give. You have youth, you have labor, if you have time, give. You don't have to give everything, just give something, and it'll come back to you. So that's how you do it.
Yeah. There's some questions in here. One, I just want to give a shout out to Rashayla Marie Brown, who's in here just sending love. And also Dr. Amy Mooney, who's another incredible person.
Oh, y'all, I love y'all. I love everyone.
And there's a question about, there are a couple of questions about floating museums. So I want to ask those. Jose has the question about, can you comment a bit about the origins of the floating museum? And then I want to pair that with Paola's question. Hey, Paola. And let me find it. And she asks, can you speak about the work of the floating museum and how to navigate between Fahim, the individual artist, and Fahim, the collaborator who's part of a team?
Yeah. I can't go too deep. I was very specific not to spend too much time on Floating Museum because it really needs its own space. And we don't have enough time to talk about all those things. But just in a nutshell, for those that don't know, Floating Museum is a collaborative that kind of evolved into an arts nonprofit. And it initially was thought of to kind of have co-directors. And the hope is that it will continue to grow with leads. So it was really a commentary, not a commentary, it's an alternate model to museum practices that kind of it's a third space, right? So there's a gap between community space and museums. We kind of occupy that middle space. We move in between these spaces. We have an architect, Andrew Shackman, an artist, Jeremiah Hospital Spofford, and a poet and sage and griot, Avery R. Young. And we kind of do like really try to do impossible things and leverage, build our Floyd Museum family to get those things done. It's thinking about the city as a museum and the neighborhoods as galleries, and putting the same amount of time into the spaces but we also consider the museums a part of the city. So we collaborate with museums as well as community spaces, artists as well. A lot of pride in that. But yeah, no, that's really hard. And Paula, I think if anyone knows that, you know it more than anyone with the work that you've been doing. So yeah, I've been trying to be a little more specific about, especially at this point in my career, about calling out my studio practice at times and not my Florida Museum practice, and understand that I don't have to cram everything into every conversation, which is traditionally what I used to do. But now I'm trying to refrain a little bit. There's more, you know. So hopefully y'all go and look that up. Florida Museum, just Google Florida Museum Chicago, you'll find us.
Great. And there's just so many good questions in here, but I'm gonna
Good
end
questions,
on,
good people.
yeah. And thanks for, just great comments. Allison's in here. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then,
Allison, hey.
yeah,
my
hey.
curator. Hyde Park Art Center, I gotta mention it.
Edra. Hey, Edra.
Yeah.
So then the last question, which is an interesting one, from WM, at what point do you feel, and this will be the question we close on because we're almost at 7 o'clock, but at what point do you feel you found your true voice, and how did you know?
Wow.
And I would say maybe as an artist.
Yeah, that's a good point. At what point did I? Wow. Yeah, I think the point, we didn't really talk about shacks and shanties, right?
Mm-mm.
No, we didn't. You're right.
You want to go for another hour? We can make this a 3-hour one now.
We can't. So no, I think there was a moment when I stepped away from the Southside Community Arts Center. And the same time, roughly around the time I graduated from grad school. So I stepped away from Southside Community Arts Center maybe 2 years after I graduated from grad school, around 2009. And that was the moment when I had this skill set of administration, of kind of figuring out how to do something with nothing. You go back to thinking about me as a scrapper, a young student, finding materials to make art. Like spending no money to make art other than a stick box, you know. Administration, how to leverage community, how to listen, how to make programs, also on a shoestring budget, right? And then in grad school, I was introduced to the rest of the world in a certain sort of way. And then I was able to take everything previously, and I brought that in, the scrappiness, reuse materials, administration, culture. Now I have the art canon, I'm, performance, video, all this stuff. And then I step away from all of it. And now what do? So the first project I did kind of leveraged all of that, curation, building, community work, all that together. And I want to say it was this project where I was doing this in vacant lots in the community garden spaces and stuff like that, where it all kind of came together. And also is the moment when I stopped caring. Like, I was like, well, I have my own museum. I'm good. If I just do this, if I just do my own stuff forever, I'm fine. But funny enough, that was the moment when I was approached to have my first major solo show, is when I stopped caring. Of
course. Well, obviously I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but we won't do that tonight.
We'll do that in the virtual bar, y'all. Where's the virtual bar? We got to go to the virtual bar, the after party. Where's the virtual after party?
So I just want to say thank you. Thanks again for
thank y'all
for this conversation, and thanks to the Society for Contemporary Art. And I will pass it to Patty, I believe, to close us out.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you so much, Fahim and Tempest. This was really fascinating, and I think everybody really got a lot out of it and enjoyed it. I also want to thank the audience for coming. It's not an easy thing to do, to come to Zoom and I'm glad that we are able to share these programs with you, and we hope to see you again. Thanks again, Tempest and Fahim.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patty.